I'd like to call this meeting of the Human Resources Committee to order. It's Tuesday, August 2nd. It's approximately 5:40. We're at the School Administration Building, and Mrs. Hohensee will call the roll.
Mrs. Seam is here. Mrs. Oden?
Here.
Dr. Murataki?
I'm here.
Mrs. Hohensee's here. Dr. Mosley's here. Mrs. O'Gara's here. Dr. McKinley's here. Mr. Farrington, Mr. Kaufman, and also Ms. Van Toylen.
We have a quorum. The first thing on our agenda is that we are fortunate tonight to have John Forrest with us, who is interviewing for the Broad Street Elementary School. Would you like to introduce yourself and share with the listening audience, as well as the board committee members, a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's John Forrest, and I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for your time tonight. I've had several interviews in Nashua, and I'm very grateful that I've been selected for this position. I come to the district with a lot of experience. I started as a music teacher. I taught music for roughly 6 years and had the opportunity to be an assistant principal / baseball / softball coach, and that was great. Moved on to be a principal in the town of Bristol, New Hampshire, which is up in the lakes. They called it the Ugly Lake. I don't know why. I mean, it doesn't get as much tourism as like Winnipesaukee, but it was beautiful up there. At that point in my life, though, I was driving from Ware and then Bedford, New Hampshire, all the way up 93 to exit 23, and that was too much. I have young children, and it was too difficult. I had the opportunity to be the principal at the Beaver Meadow Elementary School in Concord, New Hampshire, where I spent 6 years, and now I'm here. So I appreciate all the time, and I'm excited. I've learned a lot from the people, and everybody I've met has been absolutely wonderful.
Well, we're delighted to have you here tonight.
Thank
Are
you.
there questions for Mr. Forrest on the committee? Anybody?
If I may?
Please.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for looking at Nashua so sincerely, and I guess to put up with as many interviews as you've had.
You're dedicated
got to know us
finding
a
the
little
right
bit.
person. That's
Yeah.
what that tells me.
Yeah,
so.
and hopefully, I hope you're looking at a school district that, as you know, we are in a state, Dr. Mosley's new leadership for us. So I think we're in a healing process, myself, in a way. I look at it that way. And I have to tell you, when I read this resume, I was very impressed by your qualifications. Of the resumes I've seen, thank you for one page, most sincerely. It was, but that's a big deal, okay, to me anyway.
I've done more, but
well, I appreciate the abridged version, but I also felt the accomplishment, and it came across, because sometimes in the resumes we receive, there really aren't accomplishments. It's kind of like, I did, but not an accomplishment part. This resume reads as accomplishment. So I'm very pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
I look forward to you joining our staff.
Me too.
And if there's anything I can personally do, please reach out.
Any advice? I have a 100-pound golden that's at home circling right now because Thunder's coming in and he wants daddy. No advice? All right.
That I can't help you. I was going to offer a bone, maybe some food.
No, he's 100 pounds. He's good.
Beyond a bone.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
So are there other, Mrs. Hohensee, your questions?
And welcome,
Thank
but
you.
not personal to you. It's just, we've discussed recess in our district. I just wondered how you felt about recess, multiple recess before lunch, after lunch, withholding recess as punishment. Anything you want to share on that topic?
I can touch upon a couple of those. Everybody's pressed for time. We have standards. We want the kids to be in the classroom learning. We all need breaks as adults, and we should be able to sit for extended periods of time. And I've been in meetings with adults and seen that that's even not possible for most adults. Children, it's just absolutely, they're not wired to do that. What I've found in my experience is that offering recess before lunch and adjusting the schedule in any way that you can so that kids can go out and get everything out of the way and then come in and eat lunch so that they're not just devouring their lunch and trying to get out to recess. Recess is a time of complication in an elementary school. A lot of stuff happens. I'm trained to eat lunch like at 10:45 to 11, which people find bizarre, but I'll tell you what, after that, when the recesses start going, you tend to run into issues with kids. Having recess before lunch is also good because after, if there are conflicts, the adult that child or those children know best, their classroom teacher, can be there with them to help them resolve it. As a punishment, we have logical consequences for children. I think that makes the most sense. Taking away a time that they physically and emotionally and mentally need doesn't always work, and it's not helping the kid. In the past, and this has to do with staffing and flexibility, but we've had children who did in fact lose their group recess with their peers, but were able to go out at another point in the day with another staff member, be it a paraeducator or a PE instructor or somebody who is willing to just to take the child out and do something. It is important. I think as kids get older and can sustain longer attention spans, they don't necessarily need a lot of recess, but it is important.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? I guess I'll try to throw a real hard one at
Okay.
you. I would ask you about your style of leadership, and specific, how would you, from my perspective, it's really important to build a team. 2 people can do better than 1 and 3 better than 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the kind of thing I'd like to hear your take on that.
When I started, not necessarily when I was an assistant principal, my first principalship, I had a superintendent who said, you need to design an entry plan. And I said, I don't know what that is. And he handed me a book, and I read about what an entry plan is. And I've used it in several capacities and encourage other people to use it. Before day one, you should kind of know what's important to the community, what's important to the school, what's important to the staff, the parents, everybody who has something vested in that school. And this speaks to my leadership. I want to know what's important, what people perceive the problems, if there are any to be, what people think are the sacred cows. These are things that are important to this community, this school. We can't mess with that. You need to know the players, and then get to know before you start making decisions. In my decision making, I think if you asked any staff that I've ever worked with, I am a team player. I want committees to happen. I want things to be discussed in my office, you know, with the door open, and I want meetings to end when they end. I don't like things to carry off into the cafeteria or the parking lot or someplace else. If you have something to say, hopefully you're able to say it. I've also been somebody who folks can come into my office and then shut the door and speak very openly and frankly, even if it's criticizing me. But I truly believe that, you know, it's impossible to get everybody rowing in the same direction, but if you get almost everybody, the people who aren't rowing with you, will kind of drop off, get into another boat or something. So, but get to know the people and invite them to get to know me.
Dr. Mortaki.
Yes, thank you. I don't think you've seen me before because I haven't.
I did online. I read all your profiles.
Well, you did.
I did see you.
So,
Don't quiz me.
no, I just want to ask you a question. I own a small business,
Mhm.
and so I've essentially been the hiring and firing manager for employees. So
Yeah.
the question I always have is, why did you want this job?
Why did I want this job?
This job. You
Um,
went through a lot of work to try to get this job. Why
I-
did you want it?
So one of the things, a little personal thing, I still play Little League for grown-ups. I play in a men's baseball league, and I'll say 5 players on my team are actually police officers or have very strong ties to this community. And I said, you know, I'm looking at Nashua, and they just spoke so highly just about the school district, the community. They live here, they raise their kids here. The folks that I have met have been just fantastic. I was just, and I can't remember his name, but he's the principal of Bicentennial, correct? Is that it? Yeah. He just cruised in and said, hi, John, and said something just wonderful to me. I received a card from somebody in this room since my last interview. I mean, those are the kind of people I want to be around, because that, you know, that translates into what happens in the schools. It wasn't a joke, I did read your profiles online. They're right there. And I have been in communities where the Board of Ed or the school board have been more budget and tax watchdogs, and that's an important hat that you all need to wear, and we all need to wear, but that was it. And they weren't people who seemed to be super passionate about education. There weren't people who had something vested in the quality of the schools. They were more concerned about how the school's spending habits were going to impact their personal life or their small business. hiring and firing is not, you know, on my top 10 list of things that drive me to this job or any job. But I think this is a place, there's work to be done, but it also has a great solid foundation with people who care about the community and about the school district, and I want to be part of that. So hopefully that answers your question. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Miss Van Twyler.
Thank you. I see here when I guess, at Beaver Meadow, that you led the literacy collaborative team to design effective intervention plans for struggling.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
Well, yeah, I was practicing my reading skills, not too good, particularly in a public environment. My reason for getting on this board was to see that children could read at grade level, at all levels. So I'd like you to expound on what intervention plans that you did for the struggling learners.
Great. We'll start with a visual thing that was in my office. If you're familiar with Fontes and Pinnell, kids have, I'm going to use the word graded, they're not graded, but they have reading levels, A through Z, and it's designed so that you know where a child should be given a certain grade or an age level. That was up on a wall in my office. We took down a whiteboard and we made that. Every kid had a Post-it note and the alphabet was up there, and every kid, it was written really small so you couldn't see unless you were really close to the board. And they were color-coded by grades. Kids would come up, especially first graders, second graders, who were flying through reading levels, and they would get to move their tag. And they're like, Mr. Forrest, you know, I'm up to a D, and that's fantastic. I'd move their thing, or help them, or lift them up so they can move it, and then hand them a little, I had pencils and stickers and things like that. The teachers got a kick out of it. The kids loved it. The kids who weren't moving were the kids that we discussed in those literacy collaboratives. Why has Johnny not moved it? And at that table were anyone who was providing an intervention for the kid, and we use all sorts of different things. We use dibbles to kind of gauge kids' progress, which is dynamic indicators and basically literacy skills. We do that a lot as principals and assistant principals. But we used all kinds of tools, and we sat around and we had data in front of us that said, this isn't working, so that I could say, could you please work on this? Or actually the literacy specialist would say that, not me. I would be there facilitating the whole meeting. But for every child who was struggling and not making the progress that we would expect, we made sure that there was somebody working with that child. And we had resources. I've always been in a Title I school, and we had resources, and we used them really effectively. But more importantly, we talked as a team about that child. So at the table, you would have literacy specialist, Title I tutor, classroom teacher, if the child is receiving speech services or not, a speech pathologist who was there. And it was time-consuming, but time that was well spent. And when we left, when a meeting broke up for each child, those involved with that child would have a plan that said, we are going to work on, keep it real simple, but we're going to work on just decoding simple letter blends. And this is how we're going to do it, so that the 3 teachers who that kid might see every day were all on the same page, using the same strategies and had the same goals. And then we would meet the following month. Okay, where's Johnny? Great, and we would celebrate. Or Johnny's still struggling. Maybe we need another tier, another type of intervention. And we had tools, leveled literacy kits for kids to read in, so that they had books that looked like their peers' books, but they weren't. And we were fortunate enough to spend all our money that we had on staff and those tools so that we could push kids along.
You mentioned data. What did you use? And
depends on the kid.
What percentage of these children that couldn't read well got better?
Moved
when you
look
got
at my
move their
board,
sticker?
yeah, when you looked at my board, there were stragglers, and as expected, some of those kids would be the kids who were already identified as having special needs. And so that became a whole other discussion. How can we get this child to get the services that he or she needs to close that gap? And that's all we do with kids, is try to get them to close that gap. You're always going to have some kids, and it's really tough to swallow. And I kept it visual for everybody who came in my office to see that that was a focus of ours. And we had talked about putting it on my computer and stuff, but I wanted to be hit in the face with that every day, because that was the most important thing I felt. And the reading was the most important thing. And I think, you know, percentage-wise, we made progress. it was interesting over a long period of time to see classes, like specific groups of kids, and those of you who have taught know that there's kids that come through your school system, whatever it was in the water that year or the moon or whatever, but there are kids where a higher percentage of a certain grade level may struggle. And we saw that and we could track that and say, okay, that third grade class is going into fourth grade next year. We need to realign staff so that we have more kids. And it's about resources, it's about using time wisely, it's about having the tools you need, but really it's about having the best qualified people to be right there in the front lines with the kids.
Well, I'm very glad to hear about your commitment to learning, reading
Yeah.
on grade level. Thank you for that.
Mr. Kaufman has a question.
Thanks. As you know, we're televised. All our board meetings are televised. So if I'm a parent in Broad Street, and, okay, this is probably the new assistant principal that we're going to have, what would you like to say to that parent that's watching? And in other words, here's your first opportunity to engage your parent
Wow.
community. What would you like to say to them?
I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to even be here. I'm coming to you with 20 years in education, successful years. I have 4 children of my own. I have a blended family, so I have a boy and a girl, and my wife also has a boy and a girl. They happen to all be teenagers right now. They've been together since the boys were 4. I know how difficult it is to be a parent. I know how things stack up on the kitchen counter. I know how hard it is to feel comfortable in a school when you're talking about maybe your child struggling or having issues. I love my job and I love my career, and I wouldn't want to do anything else ever. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just, I noticed that you were in Concord, and is Concord the 3rd largest school district in New Hampshire, do you know? Was it a big school that's?
Not a big school, but a big school district. Not quite Nashua or Manchester. Very similar in demographics, but not quite as big. Maybe 3rd. I don't know. I know that there's been, yeah, I don't know the specific numbers. But a lot like Nashua, we had and I don't know if you refer to them this way in Concord, or in Nashua, but neighborhood schools where you draw from certain neighborhoods. And each neighborhood school had its own flavor, but we were all trying, like I said earlier, trying to row in one direction as a district.
Well, this is not a Title I school, this is Broad Street.
Right.
It is Title I?
No.
I was gonna say it.
But there's a lot.
I've only been on the board 12 years. Can you help me?
You were right in saying it's not.
Thank you, I didn't think it was. I finally memorized, I think, what those schools are. And I guess I wonder if that concern, going to the, we do have, I don't want to scare you away, but honestly speaking, we do have a resources problem, and most especially, it concerns me that, of course, now they're saying that Title I is being challenged, I guess, right now with the new. So, but does it concern you that there will not be Title I money and that resources are problem?
No, because there's never enough resources, and even though we had the luxury of funds through Title I, that you're familiar with the supplanting supplement, we tried to make our schools equal, so even though maybe my school was drawing some Title I funds, we tried not to offer anything different than any other school, and I think that's the way to do it, and that's up to your administrative team to allocate, you know, okay, this particular school is drawing some funds, and we gotta, although we're in separate community schools, we need to keep things kind of equal, because all these kids are going to, and forgive me for not knowing, I only pay attention to really the elementary school stuff. I don't know how many middle schools there are, or 2 high schools too, right?
2 high schools,
No,
3 middle schools.
All right, I grew up in Londonderry. I'm sure we competed against Nashua with some Purple Panthers,
I'm
right?
sure.
Yeah, right. Okay, so, but I don't, but at the end of the day, I'm sure you have a vision of what you want that graduate to look like when he or she walks across, and the only way to have that, you know, an even playing field is to make sure that the funds
We
are
do
allocated.
have a lot of our kids graduate not reading on level, going to Miss Van Twyver's concerns. But the board has established a goal that by 3rd grade, we'd like to get all our kids reading on grade level. And we're confident with new leadership that we're gonna soar right up there with the Eagles, and we're gonna,
Challenge in 3rd grade is the perfect, that's where you need to have them in and on level.
I think it's the heart of the board. I think if you ask every one of our board members, they would tell you that that's a major concern for us, Miss Van Twyver.
Another question is on evaluation process for
Mhm.
teachers. We have a program that walking around or.
Mini observations.
Thank you, sir.
That's okay.
I have
I
to
blew it in
tell
one of
every-
my interviews because I studied with the guy who wrote a book
I
on
always
it
have
from
to have-
Harvard, and I couldn't remember his name in an interview.
Okay.
Kim Marshall.
Yes, oh, that's, I've read of it, yeah, I liked Kim Marshall, we had him here.
Right.
But I'd like to know if you did this in the past, and what you think of it, and how you perceived they improved the teacher. I guess that's what it's.
It's a fantastic question. I'll start with just a little. I was in my 20s waving my arm in front of 60 some odd middle school band kids, and my principal, who was a fantastic man and a mentor to me at the time, and this was in the town of Peterborough, walked in, raised his cup of coffee, said hello, showed up at the concert, and then the next day I had an evaluation on my desk.
Really helpful.
I was good, but I was looking for more. That's an extreme, and it was done. I was a music teacher in a school, a large school, and I understood what was going on. The old model would be, I'm going to tell you, hey, next week I'm going to come in at 9:30. If you have the chance, please submit your lesson plans beforehand so I know. My first experience as an administrator, my first year as an assistant principal, I didn't do a whole lot of supervision and evaluation. We were just trying to get the school to run. But by the second and third year, I was splitting the staff with the principal. And one of my first experiences as an administrator was sitting in an actual observation. That was, we had the pre-observation meeting and we did all that stuff. And a child turned to me and said, "She never does it this way." And I'm sorry if you couldn't hear that, I don't want to say it. But, and I was like, I get that. I understand that. The mini observations, I pop in, I say hi. In Concord, the kids knew me. In the beginning, they would stop and say, "Oh, why is he here?" And then it turned into, "Oh, it's just Mr. Forrest." And he'll ask us a question. And my favorite question was, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you learning?" And I loved when kids would whisper to me, "We're studying this." And I had a very experienced teacher who bought into it very quickly, but said, "This is what I want from you after, is I want," it was 2 stars and a wish. She wanted me to say 2 good things that I saw, and then maybe I wish. You know, I wish you did this a little more, or I wish you saw this that I saw and you didn't. And it was all done informally, in conversation, at an appropriate time, either in between classes, at the end of the day, before the next day. And then we started to follow up with emails. And it became, teachers started to opt into that as their model. And I loved it. I had my spreadsheet. I knew whose classrooms I was going to buzz through each day. And it wasn't that big process where I'm going to do this, you're going to come see, you're going to write a formal evaluation on what you saw. It may be authentic, it may not be, but when you pop in, it's authentic.
Yep, and how many of these would you do in a year?
So,
Realistically?
18. No,
I know,
realistically,
Mr.
we were
Marshall
trying
says
to,
10,
yeah,
doesn't
we
he?
were trying to do 10. So in the first few years, though, we only offered it to experienced, tenured teachers, and they could choose to do it or not to do it. And so we had to do 10 for them. Everyone else, if they were just interested in it, even though they weren't eligible for that sort of model, we tried to get 3 to 5. So it was a lot. But I was out and about in the classrooms a lot anyway, so it might as well be more than just me playing, with the kids, honestly playing with the kids in the middle of the day. It was doing something. So it was good. And you're always, as an administrator, even as a teacher, you're always watching and forming stuff in your head and opinions. And the problem with that old model is you couldn't slip any of that stuff in, even if it was great stuff, because it wasn't part of that scheduled observation block. So I love it. I'm glad you guys are doing that.
I have another hand, Dr. Mosley.
Yes,
Dr. Mosley.
We're talking
Dr. Moritaki, excuse me.
Dr. M.
All these doctors.
Yes.
I know, I'm gonna have to go back to school.
Me too.
Okay, so a couple of quick questions. I hope they're quick. So you're going to be going into Broad Street,
Mm-hmm.
and if I recall correctly, they're a half-day kindergarten now, and they're going to be going to a full-day kindergarten
Yay.
in the fall. Right? So what expectations do you have of how this is going to go there?
Well, first, I hope more people play Keno, because isn't that how we're funding it?
Yes, absolutely. The more money comes in,
Yeah.
the more money
I
comes
wish we
in.
had a better funding mechanism, but that's. So it's going to be bumpy, and I don't know what the district has for space. And I've always had what we were able to do was half-day kindergarten, AM, PM session, and it became a nightmare trying to place children because every parent had their own wishes and schedules and all that. Full-day kindergarten's great. I don't know how it's going to impact. Hopefully you'll have the facilities and the staff, because once a kindergarten teacher goes to a full-time kindergarten teacher, and kindergarten teachers don't misunderstand me, kindergarten teachers out there, I know you never get a break, and in between, you know, you're supposed to have however much time between the AM and PM session, but it was never really your time to do anything that you were supposed, you know, or obligated to do, plan, eat lunch, things like that. So it's going to impact school schedules, I would assume, because you're going to have to provide some sort of prep period for those teachers. And I don't know specifically, hopefully, you know, Stacy's been thinking about it. And that's a huge change coming into any community, and I'm glad it's here. But it's more complicated than just getting the funding for it. You know, do we have the space? Do we have the resources in our building to handle the kids? And it'll be a change for the community too, especially if the community's used to having half-day kindergarten. And I assume in Nashua you had kids that were going to before or after school care, and that's going to change their programs as well, which is concerning.
Second question. This goes back actually to one of the earlier questions on the mini observations. So when these things were first rolled out, it was, you know, really a big thing to be using tablets and special software tools and all this other. How do you do it?
We avoided that part of it. No, we did, and I say that not because we didn't have it, because we had iPads and we were working towards one-to-one
Right.
with the kids, and everybody, and the iPad was just a tool, like we have notebooks and paper and pencils. We avoided making it about the technology and having, and Concord likes to kind of do things their own way, even though, you know, we had Kim Marshall sitting right there with us saying, you know, this is the way schools are going. And we avoided it, and we ended up coming up with some templates that we would use as emails, you know, and, you know, Kathy, thank you so much for allowing me to come in your class, and these are some of the great things I saw. I made a spreadsheet, because that's what I do. I made a spreadsheet with all the teachers, and then, you know, the observations and links to the notes that I took, so I could always just, you know, I'm going to say remember, but we all know it's not remembering. I would always click on the link and, oh yeah, there it is. I'm interested in it. What I'm afraid of is back when good old Mr. Dunning came in and raised his cup of coffee, that kind of observation, that written narrative about what the principals saw is sometimes replaced by a checklist. And I would hate to see us go back to that, where they come in with a checklist and was the, you know, the fire exits, where they properly posted, check, you know, and that, because that's not what that's about. It's about having a dialogue with your staff about what effective teaching is, how do we get better, how do we build our relationship so that you see me as not only the assistant principal or the principal or whatever, but somebody who's an educational leader in the building that wants to help you help the kids. And that's really the ultimate. So if we get bogged down in a checklist or what's appropriate language and not, we're never going to reach our goal. So that was our fear. You know, I don't know where you're at here. I've seen both being used, and I'm comfortable with both. I would just hope that if we were relying on the technology for that end of it, that it didn't just become a checklist.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Farrington.
It's very obvious why you've made it this far. I think you're an outstanding candidate.
Oh, thank you.
I look forward to working with you. Kindergarten, I've received multiple assurances from various people in the administration that everything is going to go very smoothly. And understand, we've had 5 schools, our Title I schools, have had full-day kindergarten all night.
Right.
And so I think that big change like this, there's going to be a few little glitches, but I have a lot of confidence that it's going to go well, and I'm looking forward to it.
Great.
You've jumped through a lot of hoops, so I'm not going to ask you to jump through anymore, other than ask if you have any familiarity with iReady.
iReady. I don't.
Well, you will then.
Okay. What is this?
You would like it.
I mean, I might. Well, we found out that I knew the math program because we were piloting, snowballing it, and then it turned into Eureka, and it was like Eureka. Oh, I know now. I know what that is. But iReady, is it a software or?
It's testing. It's well, we don't. What is the first grade? We've eliminated it in kindergarten at first, but it's a testing system that It's tied to the Common Core
It's
standards.
85% linked, it's at least
Okay.
85% linked to Common
Okay.
Core.
Is it adaptive, like a map
So,
testing?
yes.
Or?
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's a reading
Great.
component, there's a math component, and students engage in that. And it basically gives you some information on where students are at. It also gives you some indicators in terms of the standards that the students can work on and improve. So there's not to get too much into the weeds, the students can take an assessment, then the teacher can use those assessments to design the lesson plans, the assessments, and then the students can retake iReady to see how much they've improved. There's another component to iReady, which is the instructional piece. We don't use it too much, but it's out there where students can access the instructional component of iReady to get some tutorial pieces online as well. So it's
It
just
sounds a
kind of-
lot like measures of academic progress.
We test it.
Like, are you familiar with the STAR?
Yes.
STAR testing?
STAR testing, okay.
It's very similar to the STAR testing,
Okay.
except the STAR testing is about 20 minutes administration. iReady is a little longer, it's about 45 minutes. When you're dealing with kids, it's about 50 minutes. The great thing about iReady, the longer the test, the more data you get, but it's that time piece that's a challenge.
All right.
So there's some good things and some challenges.
I will read up.
We've got a couple
Oh, we'll
data
give you a
people.
demo.
I hope so.
We've got a couple data people that are really good in developing our internal mechanisms that will allow teachers to look at individual students and find specific areas that they're weak in and identify. And
Fantastic.
we used that this spring in a pilot that we did with underachieving children in our Title I schools that were identified through the iReady testing and gave them some tutoring, additional tutoring after school. And initial results seem to be pretty promising in that area.
That's fantastic.
So I'm not going to ask any questions.
Who proctors, just out of curiosity? Is it the classroom teacher, or do you have like a tech specialist or somebody where the kids go to take the test every so many weeks? Or
I think it varies.
Yeah.
Sometimes
It's
it's
by
yeah,
I mean, the teacher, sometimes it's by individuals who are available, sometimes it's
yeah.
not so much the proctoring piece, it's the data collection
Yeah.
and the analyzation, or analyzing the data.
Yeah.
Analyzing.
We do it up to 3 times a year. We do it in the fall. Some of the schools do it mid-year and then again in the spring.
Great. Fantastic. I will read up on it too. Yes.
Mrs. Oden has a question.
Hi.
No, hi, no, I just have a clarification as a former classroom teacher here in Nashua. I think teachers look at it as informing their instruction
yeah.
about their students. I think the board looks at it from a different level, but I think the teachers, if you ask them, it's to inform their instruction.
Sure, and that's a
basically.
great tool because you're
Yep.
killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You get the mile-high view, and you can say, "Oh, look at these trends and what our kids are doing." But the teacher's like, "So tomorrow I need to do this." Yeah, fantastic.
Any other questions? Well, on behalf of the board, thank you. We certainly appreciate your coming. Look forward to seeing your passion in action.
Thank you so
Look
much.
forward to
you
seeing
have
the
any
best of
questions?
those.
That was a fantastic
Questions?
phrase.
Do you have questions that
I'm
you
just
wanted to ask
curious
us?
because my wife is very anxious. Is the next step just sitting down with Dana or her team, or? I mean, I assume there's like
She's a team.
paperwork that needs to be
So-
signed. If somebody could write a Post-it note to me saying that I'm in, so I can just go
To
show
you
my
and your
wife.
wife, right?
To my wife, please.
She's not watching?
I will,
No, we don't live in town.
Well, you can
Well,
get it
so
off our
from
website.
here,
Okay.
so this is the HR committee, we have almost
quorum.
every, yeah. And then we have a special board meeting right after
Yeah,
this.
okay.
And so after that, either Dr. Mosley, Dr. McKinney, or myself will call you.
All right.
So I guess the question, the special board meeting will be voting on these 2 candidates?
That is the
Yeah.
question. Thank you. And then I will hear
It's all
from.
done
So
in
you
one
can
night.
call home and say, watch the video,
Yeah.
and she can watch it live.
No.
Yeah,
No.
the
All right.
The process for all of ours is that the committee recommends to the full board and the full board votes it.
Okay. Thank you.
That
I
would
guess
be-
that was more my.
And if you got this far,
Absolutely.
it's pretty
Then
good.
you
All
can
right.
sit down with Dana
We almost have.
Great.
and do paperwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a lot of folks here, so, okay.
We have a lot of coaching positions open too, you want to think about.
I've found at the elementary level, it doesn't work well with the older kids. I assume that's what you're talking about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Nice
Have a good
seeing you
evening.
again.
Thank you. Nice seeing you too. Thank you.
So, and our next the next item on our agenda is we will be interviewing the assistant principal for Bicentennial Elementary School, who is Deborah Murray. If you give us a moment, I believe that Dr. Mosley will bring Mrs. Murray
Do you
in.
want to vote on this, so I can write it down?
Do we need to make a motion now? Yeah, we can, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes, so do I have a motion? Who'd like to make the motion?
I move to, move forward John Forrest as the assistant principal. Oh, do we
Right.
have that on the, no, on our thing?
It didn't have
Assistant
any.
Principal, Broad Street Elementary School, that's all it says.
And an annual salary of, I'm sorry, of $85,300
Second,
for the, I'm sorry, for the 17-18 school year.
okay, second.
And is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. And so now I guess we will wait a few minutes until, is there anything else that we need to discuss before we get to the next candidate? Then we will be,
Okay, so,
Deborah Murray, she lives in Nashua already, is that what I'm seeing? So that will be easy transition for her, huh?
so the Title I position is still open?
No, and Bill.
Filled that on the phone interview from California last week.
Last Monday, yep,
Okay.
Monday or Tuesday.
You were in Maine.
I don't
Because
think
I'm
we-
reading-
And I think they
I'm
tried to
reading
get
this.
you on the phone, but couldn't.
I know
Is
that
the
was
one?
awful,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, it was.
So no, I'm just reading, my question is driven by her first paragraph, where she
Mhm.
applied as Title I director, so that's why.
It's hot in here.
So, Kim, should we
Perfect.
go ahead and do
We can open the
make a,
doors.
should we make a
With
motion
the
for the
sweater
revised
on.
personnel recommendations? We
Do
can
you wanna
jump-
do that
Why
now?
don't we do that? Can I get a motion for the revised personnel recommendations? Is anybody ready with that motion?
I move to accept the personnel recommendations of August 2nd, 2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any, does anybody want to exclude anything? Or are we ready to vote on this? Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. So now we will, I think now we're forced to wait for Deborah, Mrs. Murray.
Dana, did you change your employment website? It says Frontline on it, but it's still Apple Track, right?
Yes, Frontline Technologies is the company that owns ASOP and Apple Track.
Oh.
ASOP is our substitute calling system.
I think it's Title I.
Mr. Mosley, Dr. McKay, and I think, Ms. Maloney is out there.
Did we confirm the date to start the interviews for North?
Yes.
The dates that were chosen or accepted?
Right. Mostly everybody's scheduled. I still have 3 people that I'm waiting to hear from. But
Looking good.
Tuesday, yeah,
How many candidates do you have?
we have 10 candidates that we're interviewing.
How many internal?
4.
For what?
North.
Afternoon, High North principal.
Oh,
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Maybe we should introduce ourselves
Please.
around the table. Let's start with Ms. Van Twyver.
Elizabeth Van Twyver.
Hello.
Hello.
Tara Swansea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Sandra Zane.
Howard Kaufman.
Hi, Dottie Roden.
Hi, Di.
David Murdock.
Very good, I like visuals.
George Farrington from Board of Ed.
Garth McKinney.
Dana?
Deb Murray, how are you guys today?
Would you like to introduce yourself and
Sure.
tell us a little bit about yourself?
I would love to. My name is Deb Murray. I have spent the last 3 years at Fairgrounds Elementary School as the instructional leader for English Language Arts and Social Studies as part of their priority plan. And it's been a great experience while I've been going to school for educational leadership, where I have a principal certification as of about 2 weeks ago. So I previously I've been a reading teacher. I've been a literacy coach in New York, upstate New York. I taught in Chelsea, Mass. At the beginning of my career, right after college. I taught 5th grade and 2nd grade. So that's pretty much led me to this next job. Thanks.
Are there any questions from the committee, board members?
If I may.
Yes, please.
We, I don't remember exactly when it was, April or May, somewhere toward the end of the school year. The whole crew came over from Fairgrounds and gave us a presentation on,
Yes.
you know, the priority program and the results that you've accomplished over there.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was there.
I know you were, but I guess, and remember, we're asking you to speak to the people at home
Sure.
also. So Fairgrounds has really embraced a process of helping their students achieve better results.
Mm-hmm.
And they invested a lot of time. They handpicked a staff that bought into what was necessary to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was a great, I personally was quite impressed by that entire presentation.
Yes.
But now that you can look back,
Mm-hmm.
so what of your Fairgrounds experience in terms of helping our kids get back up to reading level and beyond?
Yep.
I guess the first part of my question is, what tools that you had would you want to ensure that you keep?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind, I just want you to speak to that whole remediation
Absolutely.
process, because it's, for me, it's key. I personally believe, contrary to some other board members, I believe we have enough remedial resources in the district.
Mm-hmm.
We have $3.1 million of spending on remediation
Mhm.
throughout the district. You know, some 70 different staff people attached to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to believe we have adequate resources. So I would like to know if you could just address remediation,
Absolutely.
but using your Fairgrounds experience,
Absolutely.
because I want to,
I can.
because it worked over there.
Yes.
So I want to hear about what we can do elsewhere.
So the great thing about Fairgrounds is that the staff and the faculty there have been completely open and willing to do things that are suggested to them. They're enthusiastic about it, they're excited about it. There's also been a real push to make those changes to be successful with our priority plan. So the nice thing about working there is that as a literacy, I call myself a literacy coach. It was technically an instructional leader. But what you do is you work with the staff based on what they have and what they already come to the table with, and you help move them towards the best practices in whether it's literacy, whether it's math, whether it's science, social studies. So you take where the teachers are and you move them forward. And so being that we had such a great staff, faculty, leadership, support staff, that all contributed to our success, for sure. So in my experience of literacy coaching, it's very much, sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll be like, wait, you're a coach, like a football coach? I'm like, no, it's more like, you know, encouraging teachers to use the research that is proven to work with students and helping them change their practices. And we all know it's hard to change, really hard. You know, the process supposedly takes 7 years. I have not found that to be true at Fairgrounds. I think everybody's been really great about embracing things that they know will work to make students successful. So that being said, in terms of remediation, I think that we always have to do with what we have. I think that if we're given a certain amount, we will use a certain amount of support. For example, at Fairgrounds, we have 3 Title I teachers, and then we hired 4 Title I instructional paras who
have been invaluable in their ability to learn an instructional program. We've used LLI, we've used a lot of different research-based programs to help them dedicate their time to meet each individual child. So it's not about a program. It's about the teacher seeing what the students need, giving them what they need, and helping them reach their potential. So I say the things that we've had in terms of at Fairgrounds has been really great because I was able to train all of those people to do the best practice, and then they've then gone out and made some really successful success with those kids. So some really good progress. So I think in terms of when I think about the whole district and I think about support and remediation, I have to say that it's about the people. It's about making sure that the people that you have know what they are doing, know how to assess a student, whether it's in math or reading, and then know the process to go through to get them to where they need to be. So I think remediation is really important. With an RTI model, you have 3 tiers. There's always going to be the top tier. That's the 3% that are the neediest students. And then there's that second tier, which has been, as a reading teacher, that's sort of where I've always lived, in students that need help outside of the classroom. So I think another thing about remediation I want to say is that tier 1 instruction in the classroom, the teacher itself is really the one that needs to be knowledgeable about not only the curriculum, but also how to remediate in the classroom. And then it will be special ed teachers and Title I teachers and reading teachers that can do the second tier, getting the kids that need it the most. And then the third tier are the students that, I think we spend the most time on trying to really make sure they have the right program, whether it's an IEP or ELL or things like that. Did that answer your question?
May I ask a follow-up? So, given the Fairgrounds experience, and given the amount of additional resource way beyond even the Title I budget, right? There was over $800,000, if I remember correct, of additional funds that found their way over there. Is that model reproducible in other districts without the $800,000?
I mean, the greatest thing about, so I've worked in New York and I've worked in Massachusetts. And the best thing about New Hampshire is that instead of a failure model where you just keep failing and they just keep taking over and taking things away, New Hampshire has this, let's give you what you need to create a plan that you can implement the way you want to and the way you think is the best. And then every year, because I've helped Mike Harrington put together all of the paperwork and the documentation through the priority grants and the SIG grants and the state. And all of that, it's really important to make sure that you have all of those things, but also, I just lost my train of thought. What was your question again? I just totally blanked out. I was on a roll, shoot!
No, but about it being reducible, reproducible without that a huge amount of money from the outside.
Really hot. It's super, super hot in here. Okay, so anyway, yes, I do think it's reproducible. I think the best thing about New Hampshire is that it let us do what we needed to. We chose things that, we visited schools that have been successful in their turnaround. We did a lot of planning about what was best for turning around a school. And I think because we had that ability to do that, I think we were able to find what works and what doesn't. There are things that we did, it was trial and error at Fairgrounds. We tried one thing, it worked, we kept doing it. Like responsive classroom, we were all trained, all the staff was trained. And then we had Mike Anderson, who was a consultant, come in and even worked off of what we already knew. Other things, we tried, one thing we learned at the Summer Summit a couple of years ago, which is where all the priority schools go every year. They're there right now, actually. And one of the things we learned was about mindfulness and teacher wellness. So me and Mike Plord, the guidance counselor, made a wellness room for the teachers. We were painting and we put up pictures, and not, who's got time to go to the wellness room? So some things work and some things don't, but it's wonderful that we're given the opportunity to try different things to see what works and what doesn't. So do I think it's reproducible? Absolutely. I think you can take what we've done at Fairgrounds and you can look and see what's most successful. The data I would collect on that is I would interview the teachers themselves to see what was most successful and was most helpful for them. Just working with teachers every day, it's been, I don't mean to, it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but I think having someone as an instructional leader to run things by and to talk things out, where that was my main job. So teachers we would have our PLC meetings every morning, and we would talk all the time about how do you remediate, how do you do best practice, how do you do best tier 1 instruction. So we were always talking about it, and I think those conversations probably teachers would say were the most the most effective.
Well, thanks, and I just really appreciate your energy.
Oh, thanks.
You know, we've had, what was it, Pat Snow when she was here, you know, she is my man, energy too perky. And
Oh God, I don't worry about it.
no, but that's it. No, but that says to me that's the enthusiasm
Yes.
that
Oh,
you
yes.
bring with you,
Of
which
course.
is you know it.
But as a follow-up to his
Sure.
comments, or to his comments, when I look at Bicentennial and when I look at
Mm-hmm.
the Ledge Street, there's a Fairgrounds, excuse me, there's a large economic difference. I would, poverty-wise, Bicentennial is probably the least poverty. And
Right.
maybe at least one of the two least.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to, do you find that's going to be, how do you
I-
feel about that?
Well, this will be my 16th year in education, and I've worked in Chelsea Public Schools, which is very urban inner city, and I work in Geneseo, New York, which I drove by, cornfields and horse farms, and I was like, what is this?
Hollis, New Hampshire.
Exactly, very much like Hollis. And then I've worked in a district that was very similar to Bicentennial in its socioeconomic makeup. But what I found through all of these years of working in different places, different states, is that best practice is best practice in terms of instruction. I know what's best for kids because it works. Whether it's through remediation or tier 1 instruction. I've worked with kids from age 4 to teenagers and adults in a reading way. And so what really works is best practice. Now, it works differently, you have to think differently, and every student learns differently. So you have to sort of monitor and adjust according to where you are, which is what I have to do at Bicentennial, is that it may be different. There's going to be high parent involvement, but I think, and I said this in my interviews before, that everybody wants to know that their kids are being taken care of and are being taught the best way they can. And so the change, to me, is not much different. Every parent wants that for their kids. So I think making sure that I am a good listener, making sure that I'm responsive, organized, things like that are just as important anywhere I work. But yes, there always is differences, but I've had a lot of experience in different places that I can use to help support that change.
Ms. Van Twyver?
I see from your resume that you're very involved with writing.
I am.
Writing Project Summer Institute.
Yes.
And writers and books you've done.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder, has anybody captured in writing the success story of
No. Fairgrounds?
Fairgrounds?
We should. Maybe
Well,
that'll be my summer project before school starts.
Well, I would suggest that might be a good idea. And then
Yeah.
that book could be shared with those, what you tried and what failed. You could share it with all the other schools.
Not a bad idea.
I know I come up with a lot of good ideas.
I know, I love it. Thank you
I
for
love to give
coming to
people
summer
work.
school, by the way.
Oh, shucks. And she's just as peppy maybe a little more peppy at summer school.
Elizabeth came and volunteered at our summer school this summer, which was wonderful. They loved it.
Yeah.
So
It was fun.
Mrs. Odom?
Can you speak a little bit, as assistant principal, you will handle a lot of discipline issues.
Mhm.
Can you speak a little bit about your philosophy of disciplining?
Absolutely. One of the best things I learned over the 15 years that I've worked, but mostly really with my training with Responsive Classroom at Fairgrounds, is that building relationships are extremely important with family, with the student themselves. You can't discipline a student who doesn't think that you respect them. So, being firm and strong and reasonable with children is really the most important thing. If you're telling them something, if you're you know, redirecting them, and they don't know why you're redirecting them, they won't do it. So I think it's really important to build relationships and to always explain to the kids in terms that they understand why what they're doing is the wrong thing. I also think something I've learned is that you really need to do a lot of positive teaching positive behaviors. So whenever a student's doing something that you don't want them to do, I think it's important to show them and teach them how to do the right thing. So I'm going to bring up my, at Fairgrounds I was in charge of 2 recess groups every day, and it was the students who probably were in that tier 3 behavior realm. We took out to a recess so that they had less kids on a playground. One of the best things was that I got to see them every day, and every day there was usually a sort of issue. But every day we taught them, me and our behavior parent, Shayla Anderson, would teach them the skill, the socio-emotional skill they needed to get through that issue. Let's say they were having a fight over they lost a game. So they would come to us and they would tell us their disagreement, and we would say, okay, here's what you should have said. Here's what you should have said. Let's try it. And I think teaching the student the right way to handle it is really what's going to prevent it from happening again. And the only way to do that is to build those relationships, which I've over 3 years at Fairgrounds, I knew all of the kids. So, you know, oh, Mrs. Murray, you're going to be at recess today. Yes, I can't wait to try that new way we learned to handle playing tag, which is no hitting, which is hard to do when you're 5. It's not hit during tag. So we used wands. That's what we were, Harry Potter. Yes.
Dr. Mortaki has a question?
Yes, actually, I've got a couple of them.
Great.
The first one is a modification of one I almost always ask. So, all right, so the question normally would be, why did you want this job?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also one of the board members that has opted to not get a paper packet.
Oh.
So the electronic, you know, agenda and attachments basically said, you know, we're going to be looking at a candidate for assistant principal for bicentennial. But the attachment that had your resume on it came in a separate email, which I opened on a separate day, and it basically said that you wanted to be the Title I director.
I did apply for that, yes.
And so when I looked at the agenda and it said bicentennial school, I thought to myself, I must have been mistaken.
Yes.
And it forced me to go back to the attachment that I received on a separate day, and it said Title I director. I said, this is one of the smack my head things. The Title I director applicant wants to go to be the assistant principal at bicentennial school? Really?
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
so why did you want that
That's
job?
a great question. So I started teaching in an urban district, and it's my absolute passion. And I love teaching, but I consider myself an urban educator. But I also just finished, like I said before, my CAGs in Educational Leadership Principal Certification. So that's really why I applied to all jobs that I thought were applicable to my new degree. So I honestly would have loved to be Title I director. I have a lot of knowledge about how New Hampshire works in Title I because of my time at Fairgrounds. I've been to the quarterly meetings. You know, I really know how it runs. I know the rules. So that's sort of like was a skill set I knew I could use for that particular administration job. But, you know, I think being an instructional leader at Fairgrounds really gave me a lot of experience in administration. You know, I worked a lot with teachers. I didn't observe them, but I did work with them, and we co-taught, and I taught, and they watched, and they would teach, and I would watch, and we had lots of discussion about teaching. And I think administration and assistant principal, you not only get to continue those types of conversations, but you also get to help them improve by our mini observation process, which I saw Kim Marshall this past year. I'm sort of like a huge fan of so many different. Poor Garth had to listen to me in our other interviews. I think he's amazing. I read his Marshall memo every week, which is amazing. But his mini observations, and I saw him speak to them, it's so powerful because, you know, since being a teacher and being observed in a once a year setting, I didn't learn much from that as a teacher. You don't improve much from having your administrator see you one time. And, you know, it was always like, great job. And that's kind of like the sticker on the top of your paper. What does that even mean? So I think the ability to take my skill set from being an instructional leader and applying it to administration was really appealing to me. And so that's why I decided to apply. And I'm thrilled.
Okay, second question?
Yes.
So you're going to be, you know, going from a focus school.
Yes.
Where you had full-day kindergarten.
Yes.
To a school that's going to start having full-day kindergarten.
Yes.
This fall.
Yes.
So what are your expectations of that experience?
So I think the teachers who will be teaching full-day kindergarten going from half-day are going to be relieved. I worked in a district where I was on the team to research full-day kindergarten. It was very eye-opening to see the research of whether or not it's a good practice. And I said this in my interviews with the first 2 interviews for this job. I have a mantra in teaching. I will not implement anything unless it's what's best practice that research says, and it's what's best for kids. So I think full-day kindergarten are both of those things. Research says it, and I think the teachers themselves will feel relief. You have a lot to pack into a day. Play, you know, curriculum, socio-emotional learning. I mean, there's so many things that kindergartners need in a year, more than I think we realize. The only people that realize are the kindergarten staff and teachers that do it every day. And I think teachers will be relieved, and I think it'll give them a lot of opportunities to implement things that they haven't been able to do before, whether it's author studies or celebrations or cultural explorations. I think that it'll be a nice relief to have more time to do that. All of us want more time. And the pressure will be less also. So I think it's exciting. I think, especially coming at it from an instructional and a curriculum perspective, I think that it'll be exciting for them to say, oh my gosh, I know I have to teach these standards, but now I can do it in an hour every day and have that be a routine and a schedule that I can implement for the, you know, whole day. Or it can be a thematic thing where they can do it throughout the whole day and have a snack and then, you know, do their developmental play centers in the afternoon based on what they learned in the morning. So I think it's a really exciting thing, and I think the teachers will be really pleased with how much different it will be.
So you have a full day
Yeah.
through the school year, so that you can actually address the 90 requirements in the
Crazy,
Common
right?
Core for kindergarten, which is just insane.
It is. I have I've been really familiarizing myself with the Common Core state standards since they came out. Did you know there's an app on your phone you can get?
I got it.
I've got it too. I love it. Well, it's just so nice because you can be like, something I tell my teachers all the time is if you want to do something at school, and teachers have the best ideas, they just do. I had a kindergarten teacher, Ms. Schneider, approach me and say, I want to do a play. I'm like, I can tell you 7 standards right now that will meet. And I think that's the thing. I think we don't realize how much the things that teachers already do meet the standards that are out there. They look like a lot because the people who wrote them wanted to be real sticklers for every single line. But really, if you look at it, it's things that teachers have been doing all along. You know, fiction and nonfiction. Yeah, I know. That's stuff that we've been doing since I was in school. But it's just being aware of the standards and aware of how to make them align to the things that you do is really what's helpful. And when you're like me and, you know, read them at night before you go to bed. I don't really do that. But I do have it on my phone and I do reference it a lot. I know.
Thank you very much.
I know. I don't really do that. Maybe a little bit at the beginning when they were new.
Mrs. Howinsey.
Yes.
I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you for applying for
Oh,
this
great.
job. And I'm so
Thanks.
happy that we're getting somebody from within the district
Mm-hmm.
that can rise to that level. And I think Bicentennial's going to be very happy.
Oh,
as
thank
a
you so
community
much.
with you.
That's wonderful. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Are there any other questions?
Come on, I
Do
love it.
you have any questions? No? No? Did you have-
We talked yesterday.
We talked for
Do
about
you
an hour
have questions for
already.
us?
No, not really. You can tell I'm pretty excited about a lot of things. So it's a new adventure, you know. I think I loved my time at Fairgrounds. I'll probably get emotional, but it was the best staff I ever worked with, the best administration I've worked with, and I'm gonna miss them a lot. So it's hard for me to make a change, but I know that it's something I have to do. And I'm excited. I'm excited about the possibility and the changes, and being able to help the place I live is important. I was born at Southern New Hampshire Medical Center 38 years ago on Friday. It's my
I think you'll be
birthday.
very happy
I know.
with bicentennial as well. I know Mike was very impressive. I don't know
Yes,
a lot
he's
of
here.
teachers,
He came
and
to-
He was wonderful. He is
I was
wonderful.
actually waiting for him.
Yeah. Thank goodness, I was so
I think you
nervous.
will.
I mean, I was so glad someone was there to talk to me.
There's somebody else out here too.
Oh, yeah?
Somebody else out here too.
It's a public meeting.
People
Future,
are,
future boss.
Uh-oh.
well,
Oh, yeah.
so, if
It's
there's,
just Mike.
Oh,
Mike, it's the same.
he's lurking
Lurking
in the
back.
He was
It's a
listening.
public meeting, you can come in. Okay.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
But you know the process.
Yes, wonderful. It was nice to see everybody. Thanks again for
Yes.
coming in this summer.
Yes.
Have a great
For
night.
coming in.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
So, are we ready with the motion?
How much did you get for enthusiasm?
Another couple hundred? We did good.
You did well.
We did well.
So do we
I
have,
did paper.
did you give us a
75.
motion, Mrs. O'Gara?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Move the nomination forward of Deborah Murray, Assistant Principal, Bicentennial Elementary School for the 2017-18 school year at an annual salary of $73,500.
Second.
Thanks.
Is there any discussion, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. So, the next item on our agenda is policy BBEB. This recommendation, I think most of us know this was a concern that Mrs. Hohensee discussed at several of our meetings, and so we decided to bring it to HR for consideration. In your packets, there was a copy of the actual policy and the change that she would like to implement. And it's under number 5, she would like to add the phrase that says, each member of the committee, including the alternate member, shall be invited to attend all rounds of interviews of candidates for these positions. So, Dr. Mortucky?
Yes, I just wanted to remark that I support the change and I intend to support the recommendation.
Okay. And Mrs. Oden?
Yes, this is what I originally,
Excuse me.
when I was on the board the first year I was on the board, this is what I had wanted in the policy, so I'm glad to see it. Also, I got a call from Mr. Mosher the other day, and he would like to have something in the policy that says before the position is posted, that the job description and the notice of the posting should come to the board first. My concern to him was sometimes we're in a time crunch, so maybe just getting it at some point, even it has to come in the folder after the job is posted so that the board is aware of the posting. He also would like to see the dates of the posting and a copy of the job description for the job that's posted.
Can you just I'm not sure.
The timing, I guess I'll just kind of reiterate what you're saying, and please correct me, Gotti. Description of the job, the timing of the posting. Like, so for instance, the job is usually typically open for about 2 to 3 weeks. The job description, and the closing date. And I guess my follow-up question is, are we looking to just send that to you for approval, or are we just sending it to the board just for just more FYI?
I think his intention was FYI.
Okay.
I shouldn't, speaking for him, but from the tone of the conversation, I got it was for FYI.
Ms. Hohensee.
Okay, so I have possible wording, and I could propose if Mrs. Oden likes it. If possible, before a job is posted, the job description should go to the HR committee first, along with the closing date date of the job, and this is for notification purposes.
How about if you say posting dates, so it would include the beginning and the ending?
So can we have a reread of that as you want it? If possible, before job posted, description of job.
This
So-
description, yeah.
Okay, so may I interject?
Yes.
So there's a difference between a job posting, which has a summary of the qualifications and a summary of the responsibilities of the job, and a job description. So, and oftentimes when we talk about this process, we get the two confused. So if the job description, or are you talking about the job posting? Because the job posting has a summary of those two things.
Job description, because we usually have a write-up of
So,
principals, assistant principal.
so usually they're very timely, so you're just asking as a FYI. So our current technology has that the job description can be attached to the posting, and the posting is on our website for everybody to see. Including, you can click on it, and you can see the job posting, you can see when it was posted, when it closes, you can see the job posting, and you can click on the job description today.
Could that be sent as an email to the committee or to the
We
board?
can email the job, so it also is very easy to electronically email a posting to you, and then you would get a link in your email, and you can click on, and it also shows the dates are on the posting, but you could click and get the job description right there too.
Because what I'm thinking what Mr. Mosher wants is to be notified, not to have to go there daily and check, is there something new today, is there something new? So if something is put in, if just a notification email could be sent to
So
the
we
board,
could-
that
yeah.
would probably suffice. So do we wanna put that in the policy?
Do you have the verbiage?
If possible, before a job is posted,
Well,
that
it has to be posted for it to exist, so.
right.
So
Okay.
when a job is posted.
Okay. When a job is posted, the job description and the post, along with the posting dates, we emailed to the
The
board.
job posting will be emailed to the board. The job posting is, the format includes the day it was posted and the date that it closes, so that's already on the posting. And then there will be a link on the posting that you could click on and see the job description.
Okay. So we'll try that again.
So, just for
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, absolutely.
Just for clarification purposes, you're looking, the job posting is accompanied with the job description. Once all that is, can that be sent, or is that, okay, here's my question. Is this going to the HR committee, or is this going to the whole board?
Because he's not on HR, I'm assuming he wanted it for the whole board.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why that expanded.
So maybe you should make sure that verbiage clarifies that.
So, if possible, when a job is posted, the job description, along with the job posting, shall be emailed to the board for notification purposes.
So the description is in a link, so that I attach it.
In the email.
Yep, and there's a link on there, and when you click that link, it's gonna take you right to our website. You're gonna see the posting, and you can click on that link for the description. It's all there.
Perfect.
Is that good?
Can I offer,
Are we saying it's not necessary? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was thinking, trying to simplify the language, maybe. The HR director or their designee will notify the board of relevant postings. and relevant, meaning those that would be of interest to the HR committee. Right, these are for the director level and above
This is
positions?
directors
And above and
as
assistant
well
principal.
as.
Right, so it's not for the
Assistant
teaching
principals.
positions per se, it's strictly
No.
for the administrative positions that we would interview.
Dr. Moore talking.
Yes, thank you. Not to be a troublemaker, but I understand the intent, and I'm fully sympathetic with the intent. But the intent sounds more procedural in nature as opposed to policy. And what I'm thinking is that, can we not simply, write that down in a procedural document and not clutter the policy? I mean, if you want to simplify it, the simplest thing is to not add it at all.
So
That's just my thought.
we already have a posting policy, because we have
You have
different
to.
rules for
You
the
gotta
different
have.
collective bargaining agreements about who gets the posting and how many days the posting is posted and all that. So we already have a procedure written for that, and I could include it in that.
You're talking about an
And it would make-
administrative procedure.
Right.
It's a human resources administrative
I
procedure.
just want to make that clear.
Yep, and it talks about posting jobs and who we send the information to, and how many days it's posted, and, because the union also wants copies of job descriptions as well, so that would be a perfect place.
So am I understanding that the only difference is that now you will be emailing it to the board?
Yes, I'll use the board
So you will
email.
add that to your procedural policy? Okay. And maybe when you've done that, you might want to provide a copy for the board so that we can
I-
just see it to review it? Is that
Yes.
acceptable? Okay. Dr.
Absolutely.
Montague?
Yes, so just to follow up, my recommendation is that we essentially vote the change that Ms. Hornsey submitted tonight, and then ask administration to come with proposed modification to the procedure at a future meeting.
Sounds like what we've agreed to. Thank you. That was great.
Okay, thank you.
So let's go back and review the motion so everybody understands what we're voting on, please.
The original motion is each member of the committee, including the alternate member, shall be invited to attend all rounds of interviews of candidates for these positions.
And so Mr. Farrington.
I'm just curious, just for my own information, are we marking a point in time now where the committee is going to do policy?
This would go, it would have to go, well, yes, this is a Human Resource Committee. I think it went to the full board, though.
That's what I'm saying, we're just not going to do policy committee anymore, we're just going to do policies.
This, in the past, it was my understanding that HR had made suggestions to the full board, as in standard policy that we always do. And then it's up to the full board to vote on it. So
Without going to policy committee?
it can go to policy, they go to policy sometimes as well. I don't have a problem with going to both. That's no problem with me. If you feel it needs to be that way, we certainly will. Who had their hand first? I don't wanna.
defer to Doris.
Doris,
Okay.
Mrs. Hohensee.
As Mrs. Ziem explained to me, this is the HR, Human Resource Committee policy, and it was explained to me that last time the committee made the previous change in committee and then sent it to the full board. So that seems consistent with a committee at least describing its own purpose more accurately than a policy committee would, and then getting approved by the full board.
Dr. Mosley, did you want to add something?
I guess maybe there's two parts to this, and I'm just thinking that is this something we'll, as the HR committee discusses, once we've made these modifications and we've talked about it and the HR has agreed on it, then does it go to policy, or where it then gets kind of processed through policy?
I'm guessing the intent, given the timeline on principal interviews, that the intent is to bring it forward to the special board meeting tonight and pass it tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, because otherwise we'll.
This is kind of a self-serving motion, but that's it, it's a time constraint that they want to get it done so that these people can be involved in the interview process.
The second piece that I have in this, I'm sorry, this is just a question to
No,
the committee.
go ahead.
Because there's a difference between attending and participating.
Yes.
Yes, I'd
And-
like that clarified, please.
And I just want to say, like, we're gonna have teachers here, we're gonna have, Garth, Donna, Dana, students, And there could potentially be 9 board members at a initial interview. And there's some discussion around.
No, that's
Not
not
under
what
this,
this
just
one-
4.
4, excuse me, 4.
But the entire HR
Three.
committee.
So,
There's only-
No, because she included the alternate to
So-
make sure Doris would be included.
I guess my question is, I just want to know the difference. Are you sitting and observing, or you, go ahead.
I had just written down for observation only.
Okay.
They should not be participating in asking questions or anything, purely for observation.
And that was the
So that needs to be
suggestion that
added.
I had. Mrs. Oden and I
So-
had both discussed it, and that was the way I would be comfortable with it. I also had originally said not only was it just observation purposes, but also that there would not be a quorum. But I guess because it's only the committee, you'd only have 4 at most anyway, so that other is not necessary, but
You've
definitely.
got a quorum of the committee, though.
Yeah.
You've got the whole committee there.
Yes, but there's no, we won't be voting. If we're observation
But
only.
if the whole committee
it's the whole
comes together, I
committee.
think you'll still have to post it.
Yes?
Of course you will.
Because
you will.
they have to- Yeah, you have to.
Can I say something?
You do have, if you wait your turn, you certainly can be so. And see, 3 or 4 of us can only talk at once. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be rude, I was just trying to finish my thinking. You were saying something and it.
I
think
was
we-
agreeing with Mr. Farrington. I believe that you would have to post it as an HR committee meeting if all of you were attending.
We did it once before. Do you remember when we did for assistant superintendent and we were here for
But we didn't have
observation only?
4 people.
Oh, yes, there was, oh,
We
yes,
did.
oh, yes, there was a time when we had,
Not from one committee, I don't think.
No,
no,
I
it wasn't
think-
one committee, it was from the full board.
I thought Mr. Kaufman and Mrs. Hohenste was there, and then one of you, not both of you. So I think there was 3 of you.
You're right.
There
I
was
was there.
3 of you,
Yeah.
not 4 of you. Do they, if it's 3,
I would suggest that since if you're going to include it in the description of the committee, if you're there performing a function of your committee, I don't think there's any question about what you have to post it as a committee meeting.
I don't have a problem with it being posted, I'm just not sure we posted it back then.
And then because it becomes a committee meeting, it's a public meeting, and then if you're going to interview people, you're going to have to go into non-public session.
But we're not, the observation only, we're not going to do that, right?
But
Am I
you're performing a
misunderstanding?
function of the policy describing the function of your committee.
May I say something?
Yes.
Okay, because Mr. Farrington seems to not have to be, he raises his hand, but doesn't have to be called upon in order to participate. There are 2 different words in here. It's invited to participate, and that would be the chair or her designee, and that would participate in the search committee and vote. The others would be invited to attend, like sitting in the back, like we've done for all the searches for superintendent and assistant superintendent. At the beginning, the board doesn't vote. We would sit in the back and Tara would count up to whether or not there were 4 or more, or there were 5, because that's a quorum, and then she would post it. But it was still, I mean, we weren't opening those interviews to the public. So this is on the same paradigm as that. These are employees. It's a search committee that's not controlled by the HR committee. It's selected by administration once again, and we are not participating, we are attending from the back of the room.
Mrs.
So
Zine?
the parallel is the same.
First, I would like to clarify. Mr. Farrington was allowed to speak without being called on because it was a continuation of the discussion that we were having. If you say something and then somebody else is allowed to answer it, then it's a continuation, and in my mind, that's a totally different thing. So I am not offended by his participating in his own dialogue, discussion. I think that was, I don't agree with that. So, having said that, Ms. Van White.
If we were doing this before, why do we need to put it in the policy? You can just tell it. And I really didn't appreciate this being rerouted and not being sent to the policy committee first. I really think that you've negated the purpose of the policy committee here.
This has been standard practice. It's been done before. Yes, it has, Ms. Van Twyver. Please go back and look.
Not as long as I've been.
Well, we are evolving to where we should not be. Would you like to?
No,
Dr. Moore talking.
I just have two observations, and they're both more or less procedural. First, if it's important, and if you have any two voting members of the committee, that is a quorum of that committee. So if you're gonna be worried about whether or not you've got a quorum of the committee, that magic number is 2. To stay below quorum, you only have 1. Now, of course, I don't believe that this should be an issue, but if you're gonna make it an issue, the quorum number is 2. So that's my first point. The second point is that I believe any committee can make a recommendation to the full board, but it is up to the presider of that board to determine whether or not the recommendation is going to be essentially directed to a second committee, or whether or not the board shall make the vote. So that's my second observation. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to clarify that. Mrs. Oden, can you help me with this? We were talking about a previous time when HR sent forward a recommendation. Do you remember the details of that?
I don't think it went to policy committee. I think it went straight from HR. We can look back in the minutes to see. It was back when Mr. Haas and Mr. Hollowell were on the HR committee with me, and I don't even remember who was the alternate.
And I guess my position on this was, and this did come up because of the import. I think that the principal at North is a really important position. Obviously, that's a big school and a lot of responsibility, and we want to be sure. I think it's an important, but I see no harm in allowing people to listen, to just for the purpose of feeling they know those individuals better. I do think that it should be observation only because, as Dr. Mosley said, too many people talking, it would override the power of the committee members. And I don't think we want to do that because I think that would be a bad thing. But I think as far as allowing them to sit in and hear what these people have to say and feel like they know them a little better as the incoming principal or whatever their management position happens to be, I don't see any problem with that. And I don't think it should be, the decision should be made based on one job or one person. I think you take the personalities out and you say, what are the jobs that are important enough that a little extra scrutiny would be acceptable practice. And to me, certainly when you get to the principal of the high schools, that's one of the biggies for me. Dr. Mosley, did you want to?
I don't disagree with everything. I agree with everything you say. I think when it comes to governance and where I think we're getting caught up here, there's a checks and balance here. And the checks and balances is that we're wordsmithing and getting into the policy of the HR, which is appropriate to discuss when we're talking about HR. I think where we're getting caught up a little bit is that, let's just say the HR wants to make a change in their policy. And they sit down as an HR committee and review their policies and make a modification, which everything you said should be outlined there. Once that's done, in terms of governance and checks and balances, it's my understanding that it would go to policy. And then all of the members of HR, whether it's a quorum or not, would review that modification. Once that and then perhaps even wordsmith it down even more, or say this is a great idea. And then you have a process that Dr. Marataki talked about where it started off at HR. It should be one of the agenda items. Have that agenda item say, for this HR, we're not talking about principals, we're not talking about personnel, we're just talking about our policies. And then from there, I'm looking at everyone, then from there, what we would do is, I envision, and just kind of putting it out there, it goes to the policy. And then from policy, there's more wordsmithing. And then we finally massaged it, and we've got it to a place where we feel comfortable going to the whole board. So there's a process in place that allows, not just in this case HR, but anything to do with policies around curriculum, anything to do with policies around our sports, anything like that, that allows that I would say checks and balances to take place in the district. Now, where we're going with this a little bit, and I'm not I think there are some questions around whether we're observing, attending. I don't even know, like, if there's an opportunity for members who are very, very interested in the principalship. If there's an opportunity for them to, you know, in addition to yourself, I don't know who is still interested in being a part of this interview process in the initial phases. I don't even know if there's 4 people or not, I don't know that. But I shouldn't say concern, I want us to think about governance, and governance talks about where we can agree on how procedurally we want to move forward with some things.
It is, the reason she has 4 is there are 3 committee members and 1 alternate. So those are the 4 that she's specifically speaking to here.
Just a question. I don't know how many committee members or board members are interested in attending. Are there more than 3?
Are interested in attending the interviews?
For the principalship at North?
I don't think it's limited, from my point, it's not just about North. This is saying at a certain, if it were South, you know, I think that, I just don't see any harm in any members. See, I don't even have I don't have any problem even if it's not, if it's all observation only and they want to come in and just listen to any of it, I don't see a problem. But when if they start to interfere, if they start to interact, now that's a different thing entirely, because like the one we had today, there were like 14 or 15 people already on that committee. So now we're gonna have 4 other board members, I mean, we're up to 20 people. And we've got people from the back of the room. No, I would have a real struggle personally with that.
I hear you.
Well, maybe I'm wrong, but Mrs. Hohensee.
Thank you. If we were to send it to policy, the next meeting would be August 15th, and then the next board meeting will be September 11th. By that time, the whole process in this instance will be over. So it will just shut down any possibility of attending for the principal at North. So that's the goal. It would accomplish the objective.
That is your goal. I saw, but I think George's hand went up first. I think.
Who did you have?
No, Ms. Van Twyver had her hand. I think you were first, but I'm not sure.
He was.
Okay,
He was
so
even
George,
before.
you're first.
Okay, I'll save you guys a speech at the following special board meeting. To me, the important thing here is recognizing everyone's role. The board hires a superintendent. It says so in the HR policy. We form a committee, the committee of the whole, we pick a leader, and we go through the process and we hire a superintendent. And hopefully it's somebody that we trust, and that person, whether he or she, is responsible for going out and nominating the people for certified positions, which would include teachers and principals and everyone else. The board, working with the superintendent, is responsible for making sure that we have success in our district. We can't hold the superintendent responsible for success at one of our high schools if the board gets overly involved in the hiring of that person in that position. Whether you sit here quietly or you ask questions, the board does not need to know this. I think that we need to respect the superintendent and his people that are on the committee. There's a representative from the HR committee. There are going to be teachers and students and parents and everybody else. There's going to be all sorts of people. And I don't think that we should come in here after they've gone through that process, and because of something that some board member has heard in an interview about a candidate that the superintendent happens to like and wants to bring forward, that a board member should come in based on something they heard and argue against. This is the superintendent's choice. He comes to us and we approve that. And I think we need to move to that model, if you will, where we respect that division of responsibilities and involvement.
Ms. Van Twyver was next.
Yeah, thank you. I attended one of these sessions where I sat in the back and said nothing. I have no problem with that happening. We don't need to have something in the committee responsibilities that says that. To quote Dr. Murtaki from many moons ago, you don't put stuff into policy that's unnecessary. You don't change policy just to protect somebody's desires. And I think that these things should come to policy first. You bring your troops with you and you discuss it. You supply the paperwork that shows what you want, and that's where the decision gets made to either recommend to the board or not to recommend it to the board. And this action of bypassing the policy committee is in violation, I believe, in our policy, our board policy for policy committee. And it looks to me like this was done so that I had a better chance of getting it passed. But it's just my opinion.
Dr. Mortaki?
Yes, thank you very much. As I stated at the very beginning, it's my intent to support this motion, so I'll be voting in support of it as one of the voting members of HR. However, I also believe that there should be a process, and whether or not this committee votes to, and we do as a committee have the ability to recommend referring this to a second committee, or when it shows up at full board meeting, whether it's a special or not, you know, it is also the presider's right to refer a motion like this to a second committee. So, you know, if Mr. Barrington were to go ahead and do that at the special board meeting, that would be, I think, completely within his prerogative as president of the board to do so. That's my thought. Now, the thing that mildly concerns me about this motion, though, is that there may be people outside of this committee who would be interested in essentially being flies on the wall of that interview process. And it's also my belief that an elected member of this board should never be precluded from attending any meeting of the district. They should not be excluded. You should not be able to ban a member of the board from going in and listening quietly. We can have a gag order, and if that requires posting, then that's what we should do. So I guess the principle that I'm interested in is that this is unfortunate in matters of timing. So I can understand, you know, one of the members' desire to basically push this forward as quickly as possible. But the timing issue aside, I think the basic fundamental thing for me is whether or not a member of this board can be excluded from any meeting of the district. So that's my point. Thank you very much.
Could I just ask a clarifying question? Under the current practice where it's just one person from the HR committee attending and the interviews are interviews conducted by Dr. Mosley and his people, would you consider that a meeting that you should have access to? Because that's not a board meeting.
If the current policy says one, and I believe it does.
It does.
Then that does not become a, you know, first of all, it doesn't break the quorum rule.
Correct.
Which would be 2.
Mm-hmm.
However, I really do feel that if a member of the board wanted to attend, whether or not he or she is a member of this committee or not, that should be permitted, and that what we should do, not necessarily in policy, but what we should do as a practice is to essentially go ahead and declare a special meeting or a non-meeting or whatever it is that we do in order to allow elected members of this board to do their due diligence. Now, I understand I'm not one of these people that likes to micromanage things. You know that. But I also believe that elected members of this board should be able to practice their due diligence for which they were elected. And if that means attending a meeting like this, it means attending a meeting like this. And whatever we have to do to, you know, declare it a non-meeting or to declare it a special meeting or, you know, whatever.
Non-public meeting.
Or a non-public meeting, we can go public and then we could go non-public. Where members of the administration committee are not necessarily members of the public.
You know,
Right.
I have to tell you that it concerns me that if we get a committee of 3 and the way our board is divided, it is not unusual for us to have two like-minded and one not like-minded. And so, in the end, it is the quorum of the board that rules. 5-4 is my understanding. So it could go, HR could pass it forward, and then policy could say no, then it comes to the board, and it is the full board that decides. 5 votes is what it takes. I think that's a pretty simple thing. And so I think that sometimes we seem to be using these committees to put two like-minded people, and then that person who is not like-minded might want to put items on the agenda and be denied that because that person is one against those two. That I do not think is in the best interest of good government. It is not a good governance thing. Good governance allows everybody's idea to be put on the table, and in the end, 5 people carry the day. There are things that George says that I agree with. There are things that he says that I disagree with. Every member of you, that being the same. Even Dr. Moritaki, occasionally I disagree with him as well. But in the end, it matters not. What matters is who has 5 votes, because that's what good governance is. And so it concerns me greatly that we seem to violate the heart of the law for the letter of the law. And in my view, the letter of the law is not where it should be. I'm not sure who had their hand up first.
Ms. Van Twyver.
Ms. Van Twyver, so.
Thank you. Number one, I'd like to ask the HR committee if any one of them has ever been denied attending the meeting, whether it's a voting person or an observing person.
Mrs. Hohensee cannot go to the interviews for North.
So who told us she couldn't?
I've asked at 3 different meetings. This is the
It's in the
third.
policy that only.
I'm asking you, has anybody on your committee been refused to attend one of these interviews? Either they're on the election committee or the voting committee, or they're back observing.
My understanding is that Mrs. Hohensee was told she could not attend because
Well,
it
let's ask Ms.
violated.
Hohensee then. Maybe she would like to tell us if she was ever denied access to attending one of these interviews.
Yes, I was denied by Mr. Farrington alone, and I know that this policy is practically verbatim in other districts, and they use it as a minimum because it's the one person gets to participate, but they have the understanding that any board member can go and observe.
And
So I've asked to observe, and I've been rejected twice by Mr. Farrington, so I thought changing the policy in HR would be appropriate. I can't even get a backlog of what's in policy committee, so I wouldn't get it out of there before December, and.
well, now wait a minute, Ms. Hohensee.
Please let her finish. Please don't interrupt each other because this will
This is
settle it.
the HR committee. She shouldn't be bringing up
But you
policy.
shouldn't interrupt her, please. That's all I'm asking.
There's no guarantee that things will go through policy quickly, plus I don't expect it to be favorably approved. So I will be blocked if it goes to policy, and Mr. Farrington will be successful in blocking me. If not for time, whatever.
My second question.
You were not called
She
on,
was.
Dr. Mosley.
I asked for 2 questions. 2 questions.
I didn't.
Well, Sandra,
Can I just,
the second thing I want to say is that this business about committees being set up to block people, I'll have to say that it started in your, when you were president of the board. You set my committee up. So let's not get into that argument ever again, okay?
It's not an argument. Yes, Dr. Mosley, please. I'm sorry.
one of the things, we cannot do this. This is not good. Let's take a step back.
I agree.
Can't do this.
Can't do what, sir?
Pointing fingers and not being cordial. That's what's gonna happen. We can't do this. Let's come up with a compromise that works for everyone here. Here's what I'm proposing, and we can talk about how we are going to work through this. One of the things we did for the assistant superintendent procedures is that first there was just the people with the HR people, I believe. Mrs. Zine, I think Dottie was there for the assistant superintendent pieces. We had a board member there, I can't remember who was
I
it.
think Mr. Kaufman.
No, I wasn't
The initial
involved in
piece.
those. I
The
think Dottie
initial.
took, I think Sandra
Let-
asked
let-
Dottie
let
to
Dr.
do the
Mosley
committee.
speak.
For the initial piece, we just had the committee. Once we saw we had, and again, I'm just kind of going to the top of my head, we had 9 candidates. Out of the 9 candidates, we had finalists come through. Once we had the finalists come through, what we did is that we had board members coming in to do, observe those finalists. And then we observed the finalists react to questions or follow-up questions that we posed to the candidates. So that's round 2. And then round 3 was a round that we had where we did have board members asking questions and were able to engage the candidates in that way. So what I'm thinking, and again, I'm thinking it might be a win-win for everyone, that for the initial pieces, that we would follow that same procedure that we followed for the assistant superintendents, where we would just have the people who were part of the screening process go through the candidates for the initial interview. And then for the second round, we could open it up and have any board members who wanted to come to be a part of that process. And I say be a part of that process, you can certainly ask your questions there as well. If you can't make it to that process, that is perfectly fine, because there will be opportunities to engage those candidates at a later time when they come before you here with the board. So that's something I want the board to consider. I think it's something where we can get to a resolution around who can attend and who can't. I asked the board, this is not about, I don't want it to turn into finger pointing. It does us no good to point out leadership. We are here, we're public, we've got potential principals coming into this district, we've got kids watching us, we've got families watching us, and I want the best candidate to come to us and be with us and not in any way look at us as not a viable place.
So, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
You were saying that, I think it's a good suggestion about being able to attend once we've made when it's the second interview round. But my concern is, you were saying that you could ask questions, and so is it again, I have this concern that if there are, like in this, today I think it was 15 or 16 people, it was a full room. And if you had, let's say you had 4 or 5 board members who showed up, that would be an awful lot I'm concerned about that.
So here's the caveat to this.
Okay.
As a board, as an administration, we have to come up with checks and balances. And I'm not against 4 board members sitting in the back, or whatever that is, whatever that process looks like as a board. How do you get there to make sure every single process that is changed through a policy follows the same procedure? And that, as a board, when the argument is twofold. Do you make the recommendations and changes right now, vote on it as HR, and then as a whole board, vote on it? By doing that, there are board members that say, that have said you now circumvent the process. That's one perspective. The other perspective is, this is something that some of the board members really want to do. So the compromise is, and for us to get on the same page is, forget about how many board members are on, are sitting in the back. Forget about that. That to me is not important. Where I think we get stuck on is procedure. And we have 2 different procedures here. So, and we have committees that are established to make sure that board members have an active voice, whether it's voted down or not. And I want the board to think about there's a policy, there's a curriculum piece, and there is HR. And you wouldn't want the policy people making an HR recommendation in your committee without you knowing it, or anyone knowing. So where I'm going with this is that I believe that we're stuck on procedure. So why don't the board think about a procedural piece so that we're all clear when we know where we're going with all of this information. I don't know who you want to call it, Mrs. Zine.
I don't know who was first.
I think George was.
George?
Well, I just think that Dr. Murataki raised an interesting point that goes beyond your HR committee, because if there are other people outside of the committee that decide they want to sit in, if Ms. Van Twyver decided she wanted to come over and participate in these, so I think you need to address it in the context of the larger board, if we're going to make it possible for everybody else just to sit in because they're curious and want to get a sense of who these people are. I think we at least need to have that conversation about how do we make it possible for non-HR members to have that same privilege.
And
I don't mean, I'm not trying to complicate it, but I think he makes a good point. And I don't have a solution.
did you want to answer
I'll
that?
defer to Ms.
Mrs. Holt?
Okay, there are two members of the policy committee here, Ms. Van Twyver and myself, which is a quorum. I believe she's in support of the concept, if not the policy, I don't know. We also have a policy, if it's an emergency, that we can enact a policy without going through all the procedures. If we don't, we miss the opportunity of which we're debating, is the interviews on the principal at North. So in that sense, there is a time concern. In the idea of getting it open, which I am totally on board, and I think Dr. Murataki is totally on board too, and I think others, we could switch this to any member of the board shall be invited to attend all rounds of the candidates for these positions. Sitting in the back, not participating. I want to get the feel so I know these candidates, so when they come to us for the final vote, because I can't even vote on HR, I can only vote on the full board. I want to know them. I want to feel comfortable that we're making the right decision. I want to do the right thing by those who elected me to oversee the district and make sure that we're doing the best. I don't expect to have any problem, but I think it also gives me a better understanding of who we've elected. Like we just recently elected a director of Title I. She was fabulous. I was very anxious when we came in and we weren't going to meet her face to face, and we were voting on a machine. That made me very nervous. But she was good. But, you know, we're trying to do our due diligence. That is the whole goal here. I'm not trying to fight with board members. I'd welcome all board members to sit in the back. I think we can set up a method to do that, whether we post it and then go into non-public, however we do it. I don't want to participate. I don't want to interfere. I don't want to come and tell you, well, I didn't like, I'm not about that. I just want to watch the interviews so I get a better depth of understanding of who these candidates are when they come forth, so I can see and feel that, yes, we really did get the best one out of all those. You feel more confident when you're voting, the more knowledge you have. I was happy to vote for the director for Title I, but I was very nervous that I did not have enough information. And I'm very nervous when I don't have that information and I have the responsibility to vote. I don't want to just say, well, I'm going to vote against everything because I don't have sufficient information. I mean, that's my almost knee-jerk tendency to want to do because I'm being throttled and denied. But I think I'm bigger than that, and I'm just hoping that the board is big enough to understand that we do have 5 people on this board that are supporting it. We do have a method of emergency changes to a policy. You can thwart us, you can push us all around, but I would hope that we're all on the same goal. Better transparency for board members so we can do our job for those that elected us.
Dr. Murataki?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
I'll be very brief. Fine. I like Dr. Mosley's compromise recommendation. And I'd be willing to support that. Thank you.
So do we have that motion in verbiage?
Yeah.
Ms. Van Twyver?
I don't consider this as an emergency. We've done it in the past where you can come and listen in the back, and there's no reason why you can't do that now. It's not an emergency.
Excuse me, can I answer that? I asked twice. I asked the president of our board twice, and was told emphatically, no. Our policy says no. So what am I supposed to do? Walk in anyway when he says no?
It is clearly in the policy. The Human Resource Committee chairman or designee does not say designees. S is plural. So the policy clearly limits it to 1. So if we want to make it possible for people other people to observe, then it does need to be changed. Did somebody else have, George, who had
Dottie
it?
had it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kaufman had his hand up, I'm pretty sure.
Can you imagine I made it through, almost made it through the whole night without saying something? I was trying, I really was.
You did a good job.
Thanks, thank you, Lisa. To Dr. Moritaki's point about any board member wishing to attend any meeting, I wholeheartedly concur with that. We do have due diligence for everything that goes on here, and we should have access to, I mean, I'm not gonna walk into a school unannounced, you know, let them know my plan to come and visit, make an appointment or whatever. We're not talking about bursting in a classroom or anything like that, but to meet with an administrator or to attend a committee meeting or whatever, I think we have a right to do that. So I appreciate him making that comment. Regarding this thing tonight, and my experience, I think in the interview rounds when Dr. Mosley was being selected, there was a very large committee of community people. There had to be, what, 15 or 18, it was a large group. And yet there were, yes, there were several of us who sat in the room. Now, I don't know if that's because that was a special search committee, and we were very explicit in terms of the board members could attend. The thing is, the assistant superintendent search this last time around was expedited. The committee met however many times they met, but the public interview like we had tonight with our two assistant principals did not occur for the two assistant superintendents that we now have in place. Did not occur. And so we could be very well intended to have the best process in place. But if we're going to jump over it because of time, and I believe that was the reason, well, actually I don't know what the reason was for that, because there was a full week in between the candidates being recommended to go forward and when the board could have met them. There was a whole week.
Was it a non-public because there was a quorum of the board at the time of the second interview? I wasn't here, I missed that, but was that in non-public or public?
All I know is I never had a chance to meet those people, and I assumed that we were following the same process we did with the superintendent search, where there was going to be a public interview. I could not make, it was a Friday, I could not make that meeting. I understand that's on me, being unable to make it. But in the past, and I do believe the policy incorporates the provision for a public interview. And that was skipped over and was not held. So we do it when we want to, is what I'm saying. And personally, I'm really caught in a bind here because I believe if Ms. Hohensee or myself want to attend this, we should be able to do that. And I don't, for observational purposes, if that's a limitation we have to have. That's our right as an elected board member. And so to limit it, I have an objection to. And part of that objection is because, given my experience on this board, is even though I knew we had a process that would have given me access to meet those two assistant candidates, assistant superintendent candidates, I was denied that access through this committee's action by not holding a public interview. So for me, this committee's previous actions has tainted the pool in terms of it being able to follow what it had done in the past. I kind of, I understand why Ms. Hohensee did this. And I would just, you know, the board can decide whatever it wants, right? So can we, in the spirit of Dr. Mosley's kind of compromise, that's the word I wanted, can we perhaps at our special meeting, make special provision, let the board vote to allow any board member who wishes to attend as an observer the interviews for the principals, and just make that happen, and we'll deal with policy revisions. I agree that they should go through policy committee. If the HR wants to handle its own stuff, fine. I think it should still be filtered through the policy committee and then onto the board as a whole. We should maintain the integrity of the process that we have. And that's true for finance, which has actually had discussions, which I'm not sure if they went to the board or if they went to policy. So HR is not the only committee that's holding discussions and making approvals directly to the board. So there needs to be we need to take another look at this. So to that extent, can this committee, without changing anything and without circumventing policies we want to maintain, can this committee make a recommendation to allow any board member who wishes to attend the forthcoming North interviews is able to do so? And can we bring that forward? It's an exception. We're having a special board meeting after this. Can we just bring that one action forward as a recommendation from this committee, perhaps, to the board to vote on it? It's a single instance, like blue plate special, as some of
What
my
I'm
union
hearing,
friends would say.
What I'm hearing, I would like now to speak to the committee, so this committee can decide where it wants to go and what it
There's
wants to
another
do.
hand here.
There were two hands, but I'd like to get this out before. I'm wondering if one of those two hands would like to amend the motion to go along with what has been discussed, to say all board members shall be invited to attend all rounds of interviews of candidates for observation purposes only. That's what we seem to be saying. And if it is what we're saying, then we need to amend the motion. If it's not what we're saying, then we need to decide what we want to do. I'm sorry, which one was first?
I just have another question, is basically of a procedural nature. Did this board have a policy or a procedure in place that essentially set up what we did with the superintendent and assistant superintendent searches? Or did we just do it?
We had a special committee.
The superintendent was an ad hoc committee.
Yes, it was.
But there was no
that, right,
policy
Mrs.
or
Oden.
procedure.
It would be in the HR, wouldn't it?
Mrs.
But-
Oden.
Yes. Speaking to what Mr. Kaufman said and Dr. Moritaki about the assistant superintendents, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody on this board that the transition from a sitting superintendent, an interim sitting superintendent, and the superintendent we were hiring was not as smooth as it should have been or could have been. Dr. Mosley was hiring his staff. He was not the sitting superintendent, and that is probably why the confusion of not having the assistant superintendents interview in public occurred. I don't think he was familiar with the process at that point, and he got no help from central office at that point, as far as we had a superintendent sitting in the office that was the superintendent until June 30th, and that's a big part of the problem there, I believe. As I said, I worked on this HR policy when I first got on the board. I have been in the district. Anybody in the district will tell you there's a lot of frustration because they feel there's too much nepotism. And that's why I put this in there, because I thought somebody should be sitting on HR and the interviews to ensure that there was no nepotism, no conflict of interest, and no bias. And what happened, one of the first interviews I sat in on, one of the people who had written a letter for the person being interviewed was sitting on the committee. I just could not believe that somebody could sit on a committee having written a letter for the person they're interviewing, and then the person gets the job. The conflict of interest, I thought was problematic. Also, the way the committees were selected, they were often targeted to certain people could sit on the committees. That's why I had people draw a name out of a hat for the ad hoc committee for the superintendent. And I want to thank Dr. Mosley and Ms. O'Gara for writing letters to people who applied to sit on the committee, who had written letters for candidates for the principal at North, and tell them, I'm sorry, there's already a bias, you cannot sit on the committee. And I appreciate that, and I think every teacher in the district appreciates that, so thank you. But I think for the observation only, if any member wants to come and observe, but I'll tell you my experience, and I've come to a lot of them for Mrs. Ziem, in observation. You learn so much from the people on the team because they're the ones who are gonna be most affected by it. The questions they ask, the discussion after they're discussing the candidates, the things they bring out, what's important to them when they know their school. I just think, I have full confidence from what I've seen in every interview I've been, and I have learned more about the district and our people from those than what I've learned really about the candidates. So I will support if anybody on the board wants to come, but please know you will learn a lot from our staff. They're
Wonderful.
It's their heart and soul here.
So,
Dr. Moore.
yes, in preparation to make the motion, I do have one question for the superintendent.
Okay.
If the wording, Superintendent Mosley, if the wording were changed to read, each member of the board shall be invited to attend all no, you can't say all rounds. To attend interviews of candidates for these positions, and these positions are assistant principal and principal. If we were to
Directors and
And
above.
directors,
Oh, directors and above.
that's above that. We have responsibility for
Okay, all right, so,
directors and
all right, so
above.
if the wording were amended to basically say, no, I understand the concern about all of the interviews. Dr. Mosley was recommending that there be
Second round.
a second round. So if we were to simplify that wording to basically say, each member of the board shall be invited to attend just
Second round.
interviews of candidates, or if you want to say second round of interviews for the candidates
I think that's better, second round.
for these positions.
Second or subsequent.
No,
Would
Dr.
that,
Mosley?
would that
I
allow,
didn't mean to speak for you.
would that allow what you recommended?
I don't wanna get into wordsmithing, but the word attend it's ambiguous.
So make it observe.
So
Observe?
observe would
Okay.
be,
All right,
I,
so the wording would then be, each member of the board shall be invited to observe the second round of interviews of candidates for these positions. Would that then
I,
enable,
one couple things, I just wanna put it out there, and I'm hearing thank you, I'm just proposing, and I'm sensitive to what Mrs. Hohensee has proposed as well. There was an idea about getting to know the candidates and understanding who we're putting forth, and I'm hearing that. So as a compromise and thinking about all board, for this, and I'm thinking about what Howard said and thinking so just kind of putting it all together. There's a concern about timing for the principal at the North High School. For me, I want to make sure that this board has procedural pieces in place. And we're not going to get to that because of the timing of the policy. So what can we do to get people on board and to get consensus and compromise? So keeping what everyone has said, here's my, I'll hit it back to the board for people to kind of consider. The board members can, for this particular motion, there is a sense that board members can attend all of the interview process for the North High School principalship opening. Attend the rounds. Observe the round, observe the first round. And for the second round, or subsequent round, to get to know the candidates better, there can be some follow-up questions that board members the board members can interact with that candidate. If board members cannot make it for reasons that are outside of their scheduled interviews, there will be another opportunity for board members to interview and engage the candidates when the candidates come in front of the board again. So what I'm trying to say and trying to put out there is that let the committee do its work for the initial round. Let them go through that process. And once they go through that process, the board will have an opportunity to meet the finalists. You'll still be in attendance, okay?
Yeah, so if I may follow up, Mrs. Zine,
Yes.
and then I think Mr. Farrington had a
Oh,
question as
well,
well.
I don't think Dr. McKinney has had a chance to
Oh,
have,
okay,
so I'd like to
but
have him
the
next.
thing is, my question is this. I would like to get to be able to implement Dr. Mosley's suggestion. And I've got like 2 ways in my mind that we could do this, as a committee and as a full board in the subsequent special meeting. So one method is to amend the wording, to sound like all members of the board and observe as opposed to attend. And so amend the wording of the motion on the floor. Or the other way is to agree amongst ourselves, almost like a gentleman's agreement if you want, that that motion could be withdrawn and simply do what Dr. Mosley suggested, because as Mr. Farrington pointed out, there was no written policy or procedure by which we did that multiple round set of interviews. So this basically tells me that as long as we can be in understanding and agreement in principle, that there needs not be a written policy that basically does this. And those of you who have known me basically know that I don't want to, to impose additional complexity on a policy if you can avoid it. But what that relies on, though, is kind of like the ability of this board to reach a gentleman's agreement on essentially allowing Dr. Mosley to implement his compromise.
Mr. McKinney, he has not spoken the whole time, so out of courtessy.
Almost set, thank you.
You're sure? Then
Farrington.
This is
Ms.
just a
Weiber.
quickie. I'd like to suggest that
Oh,
at your
I'm
next
sorry.
HR meeting, that you wordsmith this policy as you like, and also document the hiring process as a BOE procedure, and then send it to the policy committee for approval.
George, Mr. Farrington, excuse me.
I go by either. In the interest of getting to our 7 o'clock special meeting, can I suggest that we just make some simple motion that, just an interim motion that the board votes on that says, for the purposes of this interview for the North High School principal, we are going to open it up to any board member who wants to attend. We're going to have to post, we need to know in advance, because we're going to have to post it for a meeting if we're going to have more than a quorum of the committee or more than a quorum of the board. I don't want to make it complicated like that, but for purposes of observation, and because there's a lot of things that need to be addressed in this policy that I don't think we have the time to do tonight. Because I think when you read the policy, it's evolved into a lot of things. The policy is pretty simple. The Human Resources Committee says basically the committee will review and recommend candidates to the board who have been nominated by the superintendent. And then it's got this other little paragraph that talks about how they can become involved in that interview process. But as Dr. Mosley has pointed out tonight, there are things that the committee should keep to itself that are involved in reviewing of applications and all that sort of stuff, and deciding who the interview pool is. And I think that that's going to take some time to get to that. So I would suggest that this motion be withdrawn here. I'm not on the committee, so I can't do it. And you just make a simple motion that for the purposes of the North High School principal interview, that the policy will be revised, or pick your wording, to allow any board members to attend to observe.
Thank you.
Does that meet?
It meets some of the I hear what you're saying. There's a compromise piece here that,
Okay.
that I was trying to get everyone, there's a timing piece to this, and I think what people want, and I'm just paraphrasing, I might get this, what I think there's a sense that there is access that the entire board wants to this process.
To the
And-
North Highway.
Yes.
Yes,
So
I
for
agree.
this one particular process, we send this policy back to the HR. Let me just kind of phrase this. I don't know what the motion will be, but we send this policy back to HR. The board can consider this for, we can make a motion for procedural pieces. For the first procedure piece, the interview process is open up to the entire board for observation. For the second piece, for the second round of interviews for the finalists, the board will be able to, or board members in attendance, when I say attendance, will be able to participate. Meaning that for the second round, you can ask the candidates any question you like. And it can last as long as you like it to be. It doesn't bother me or the candidates or the committee. And let's just say a board member, and Howard indicated that when that happened, the previous time that he was not able to attend, and that's perfectly fine, we have schedules for that. So the safeguard against that would be when the candidates come in front of the board again, that would again present an opportunity for board members to engage and participate and get to know the members a lot better than they want to or can. So what I'm proposing for this particular round is that we're not gonna get to the policy. Let's push the policy back to HR, have them refine it, work it a little bit. And for this particular principal search for the North is what I outlined previously, I want the board to consider, and I think that's a win-win. If you think about it in theory, every single board member can observe. So and if they want to, they could participate in the second round, or even in the third round when they come. So I think.
Can I just ask if I got it, so that for purposes of the North interview, you would suggest that in the first round, there'd be observation for any board member who wants. Second round would be participation by any board member who wants.
Mhm.
And then there would be a final interview like we had tonight
Yes.
with them. And we'd do that to get through this thing, and then we can go back and more thoroughly look at the whole policy.
This is not setting precedents.
Right.
This is just for this particular round, and it satisfies board members' concerns around timing and participation.
So would you like to withdraw your motion?
There is no motion, I'm an alternate, so I couldn't make
There
one.
was
Excuse me.
David,
Yes, thank you. So, I move that the motion on the floor be tabled so that a subsequent motion may be made.
There's no
There's
motion
no
on the
motion on the
floor.
Oh, all right.
there was.
I thought
Well,
you
it
did
would've
move
been
to
one-
approve this language.
Motion, we
I
moved
would've
Who made
written
it?
it down.
Dottie?
I think David made it, I
No,
said.
he was in the process.
Okay,
Okay, well, in that case,
easier.
since it does not have to be withdrawn or tabled, I move that this committee recommend to the full board that any member of the board can be invited to observe the first round of the principal interview process and to attend the second round and subsequent rounds of the interview process for the North High School principal.
Do you want to put participate in that?
Thank you.
Okay, yes, you can amend that.
So.
Participate in the second and the third round, or
Subsequent.
subsequent,
So
that's fine.
somebody each member of the board shall be invited to attend the first round as observers, and the second round to participate, the second and subsequent rounds to participate in the hiring process of the principal
Interview
at
process.
Nashua High. Thank you.
Yep.
Principal at Nashua High School North. Did you get all that down, Doris?
I'm working on it.
Maybe you want to read it back to us, just to be sure.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mrs. Oden.
Thank you. Okay, I've got the HR recommends that all members of the board may observe the first round and participate in the second and subsequent rounds.
Well,
For
this-
just for this one, for the North High School.
Principal search.
Yeah, principal search.
You want to read it again, now that it's finished, just to be sure?
Okay. trying to make it so that she can read it. HR recommends that all members of the board may observe the first round and participate in the second and subsequent rounds for the North High School principal search.
Did you want to include in there that there will be a final board interview?
No,
That's
because of
weird.
course there is.
Well, no, there's nothing that says that in our policy, that there'll be a board
But
interview.
there always has been.
Well, that's what I was saying, that's what we need to
It says
address
second and
somewhere.
subsequent.
I'm sorry?
It said second and subsequent.
So
She's
all
right.
further rounds, those are the subsequent ones?
Go ahead, Howard. and
I think
can-
Dr. and I appreciate George fine tuning this, which is consistent with where Dr. Mosley was trying to ensure that everybody could participate even if they couldn't make the earlier rounds. So,
I will,
I would appreciate the addition
that's fine.
of that.
If I would, I'm sorry, Dr. Maritaki, you were making the motion, so I don't want to speak for you.
No, that's
So,
fine.
with a final interview with the board was fine. I think that is another yet safeguard that allows people to participate.
Yes.
Before we vote on it, I would like to say to the listening public, I hope that you have been listening to our new leader, Dr. Mosley, and I hope that you are as impressed with him as I am. I have to tell you,
No.
you are what our district needs, a leader who is going to unify us and make us what we should be, what the public deserves. And for that, I personally thank you. I
Ditto.
can't tell you enough how valuable it is.
This isn't about me, this is about we, and I'm only as good as the people surrounding me. And I need your help on this. We cannot have this, what happened earlier.
Discourse.
This is who we are, and this is what we are in Nashua.
This is what you will lead us to. And for that, I repeat, I am grateful for that leadership. Thank you so much. Having said
Can
that,
I read it one last time to make
you
sure?
can read it one last
Thank
time, feel free.
HR recommends that all members of the board may observe the first round and participate in the second and subsequent rounds, including the final round for the board rounds of interviews for the North High School principal search.
You want to read that again, Dr. Mosley?
I'm sorry.
HR recommends that all members of the board may observe the first round and participate in the second and subsequent rounds of interviews, including a final round for the board for the search of the Nashua North High School principal search. So that-
If there's no further comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Dottie, are you voting?
I heard,
You said-
I thought I heard all of my members say aye. It's
Sorry.
unanimous. Do I hear a motion? Is there any further business to come before this committee?
Move to, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
George, you're up.
Adjourned at 8:03. We're gonna roll right into the next one?
Sure.
Okay. So we'll call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. It's Tuesday, August 2nd, 2017. It is 8:04. And we're at the School Administration Building. Present, we have Dr. Martaki, Mrs. Oden, Mr. Kaufman, Mrs. Zine, Mrs. Hohensee, Ms. Van Twyver, Dr. Mosley, Ms. O'Gara, Dr. McKinney, and myself, Mr. Farrington. We have some motions that just came from the previous meeting. Mrs. Zine, are you?
Do we have the motions? I didn't get a copy of the motions and I don't have the salaries.
Okay, how about this? We have a motion to approve John Forrest, Assistant Principal, Broad Street Elementary, for the 2017-18 school year at an annual salary of $85,300.
$85,000, thank you, that's what I was lacking.
$85,300 is what I...
300.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kaufman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Motion to approve Deborah Murray, Assistant Principal, Bicentennial Elementary, for the 2017-18 school year at an annual salary of $73,500.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Maritaki, seconded by Mrs. Hohensee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Motion to approve the personnel recommendations dated August 2nd, 2017.
So moved.
By
Second.
Mrs. Hohensee, seconded by Dr. Maritaki. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. And then the final motion, Mrs. Hohensee?
So she's got it.
Oh, okay.
read it.
First personnel recommendations on it.
You just did.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes,
You're
please.
asking me to read it?
Would you please?
Thank you.
Make a motion. Make it in the form of a motion, please.
The HR committee recommends that all members of board may observe the first round and participate in the second and subsequent rounds of interviews. Subsequent rounds of interviews for North High School principal search, including a final round for the board.
Seconded by
Second.
Dr. Murataki. Anybody got anything else to say on this topic? No? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Motion to adjourn by Dr. Murataki, seconded by Mrs. Oden. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. We're adjourned at 8:06.